Okay, so let's talk about acid-base homeostasis and specifically about metabolic acidosis. So, first, we need to know what is the pH of arterial plasma. So, the pH of the plasma in the arteries is equal to 7.4. So, the pH is basically determined by the H plus concentration present in the plasma. So, the normal H plus concentration that's present in the plasma is 40 nanomole per liter. So, this will give you a pH of 7.4. But you obviously, for anything you have a range. So the range of the normal H plus concentration can vary between 37 to 45 nanomole per liter, which can give you a range of the pH that can be 7.43 to 7.35. But average, we just say that the pH is 7.4 and the normal H plus concentration is 40 nanomole per liter. So any abnormalities in this acid base balance, that is any deviation from this normal concentration, can occur in variety of disorders. So when you have an increase in H plus concentration, that will lead to something called acidosis, in which you'll have a decrease in pH. So increase in H plus concentration, there'll be a decrease in pH. And when you have a decrease in H plus concentration, you'll have an increase in pH. The plasma is going to be more alkaline, which is called as alkalosis. Okay, so let's move on to the functional anatomy and physiology of this acid-base balance. So, there are many mechanisms which can maintain the pH of the ECF within the limits, the normal limits. Okay, so one of the main thing are the buffers. So this is one of the buffer where you have carbon dioxide reacting with water in the presence of carbonic anhydrase to give carbonic acid or H2CO3, and this dissociates into H plus and HCO3 minus ions. So these ions are the ones that help in maintaining the pH of the arterial plasma. So how this occurs is that, looking at this diagram here, so looking at this diagram here, you have the formula of pH, which is equal to 6.1 plus log of HCO3 minus divided by 0.03 into PCO2. So PCO2 is the partial pressure of carbon dioxide. So the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is regulated by the respiratory system, whereas the HCO3 minus concentration is regulated by the kidneys. So when there's any change in the concentration of HCO3 minus, there's a reflex mechanism which leads to a change in the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, which maintains the pH. So for example, when you have a decrease in HCO3 minus, so a decrease in HCO3 minus means that there's relatively a acidic environment, right? So this is basically a primary change in metabolic disturbance. So that will lead to a secondary change after the respiratory compensation. So when you have a relatively acidic environment, the brain, the changes, this acidic environment affects the brain, and there are changes in the ventilatory mechanisms, that is in your respiratory mechanisms, which lead to decrease in partial pressure of carbon dioxide. Okay, so vice versa, when you have a primary change in the respiratory disturbances, that is when you have a change in the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, you will have secondary changes in the renal compensation, that is the kidney that compensates the HCO3 minus concentration, so that your ultimate pH is regulated. So this is the mechanism, this is called the buffer, and this is how the pH of the arterial plasma is usually maintained. Okay, so now let's talk about the renal control of the acid-base balance. So this diagram that you can see is basically the control which is provided by the proximal convoluted tubule. So in the kidney, the pH is controlled at two levels. One is at the distal proximal convoluted tubule, and one more is at the distal convoluted tubule, or the collecting ducts, the initial part of the collecting ducts. So first, coming to the proximal convoluted tubule, what this does is, how it helps is that the filtered bicarbonate, the bicarbonate that is filtered through the glomerulus here, is ultimately reabsorbed into the bloodstream. Okay, so this mechanism, so this means that whenever you have a systemic acidosis, this helps to absorb the bicarbonate, reabsorb the bicarbonate into the bloodstream, and hence it leads to increase in pH. So this is how it's controlled. So the actual mechanism is that the filtered HCO3 minus, which comes into the lumen of the proximal tubule, it binds with the hydrogen ion, H plus ion, to form carbonic acid, and carbonic acid further splits into water and carbon dioxide. So this carbon dioxide, due to pressure differences, it is taken inside the proximal tubule cell. Okay, and here again carbon dioxide reacts with the water that's present in the presence of carbonic anhydrase to form H2CO3 again, which splits into the H plus ion and the HCO3 minus ion, and this bicarbonate ion is absorbed into the bloodstream. So you are utilizing carbonic anhydrase enzyme here twice, once here and another time here, so once and twice. Okay, so this is the mechanism by which PCT maintains the pH of the bloodstream by reabsorption of bicarbonate ion. Okay, so now talking about the process in the regulation that takes place at the late distal and the collecting tubules. So here the main mechanism is primary active secretion of H plus into the tubular lumen. So in the PCT, what we saw was there was reabsorption of HCO3 minus ions. Here there is active secretion of the H plus ions, which gives you the same result. That is a decrease in pH if you have any acidosis. So the mechanism here goes like, first there is hydration of carbon dioxide here. This is hydration of carbon dioxide, which leads to formation of H2CO3 again in the presence of carbonic anhydrase, and this carbonic acid splits into HCO3 minus and H plus, and this occurs in the tubular cells. So now this H plus that's present in the tubular cells through a H plus ATPase, so this is a H plus ATPase, and utilizing this it goes into the tubular lumen. So this is how the H plus is excreted or secreted from the tubular cells into the lumen. Now here after this, what happens is that when the H plus keeps accumulating in the tubular lumen, it leads to a decrease in urinary pH, right? So this again will be unfavorable for the gradient. So there can't be more H plus being secreted because of the gradient that's being demolished because of the accumulation of H plus ions. So for this there is another mechanism. So what happens is that one of it is you have your phosphate buffers, that is HPO4 minus. This reacts with that H plus to form the H2PO4 minus, and this can be easily excreted in urine. Now one more buffer is your ammonia buffer. Okay, so your ammonia in the tubular lumen is generated by deamination of amino acid glutamine by the enzyme glutaminase. So deamination of glutamine. Now what happens? So through this ammonia is generated. Now ammonia reacts with the H plus ion to form the ammonium ion, and this is again excreted easily in the urine. So this is how the gradient is created, so that there can be continuous transport of H plus into the tubular lumen. So this is in general about the renal control of the acid-base balance. So what we have learned is that there are two sites, that is your PCT and your late DCT or the collecting tubules. And what happens in the PCT is that there's a reabsorption of the bicarbonate ions which is being filtered from the glomerulus, and in the late distal tubule and the collecting tubules there's active secretion of H plus ions, active because you're using a H plus ATPase. So that is how your acid is being eliminated or it is being neutralized in your plasma. Now next, coming to presenting problems in acid base balance. So what does your patient come with? How does he present to you? That is, patients with disturbances of acid base balance may present clinically either with effects of tissue malfunction due to disturbed pH. So the person can have a tissue malfunction due to the disturbed pH, such as altered cardiac and central nervous system function, or with secondary changes in respiration that can occur as a response to the underlying metabolic change, such as the Kusumal respiration during metabolic acidosis. So as I told you, any metabolic change can lead to a secondary respiratory change, right? So these can be the presenting problems. Okay, so next let's talk about metabolic acidosis. So what exactly is metabolic acidosis? So metabolic acidosis is something when there is an acid accumulation in the body, that is systemic acid accumulation, or there's a relative decrease in the plasma bicarbonate, that is there's increase in H plus or a decrease in HCO3 minus. Okay, so this is the basic picture of metabolic acidosis. Now coming to the causes of metabolic acidosis. Why is metabolic acidosis caused? So you have in the causes you have two types. One is the normal anion gap and increased anion gap. Okay, so anion gap is basically the difference between the cations, that is sodium and potassium, and the anions, that is chloride and bicarbonate. So this gap in a normal body, this gap is present due to any other anions like phosphate or albumin or anything like that. So now normal anion gap occurs, one is due to ingestion or infusion of inorganic acid. So if you yourself by any chance, like any poisoning with NH4Cl or HCl, so if you ingest any acid of this therapeutic infusion also, this can lead to a normal anion gap metabolic acidosis. Another cause can be gastrointestinal bicarbonate loss. So when do you lose it? What are the gastrointestinal causes? So it can be diarrhea or a small bowel fistula or a urinary diversion procedure. The most common is diarrhea. So if a person comes with diarrhea, you can suspect, and features of metabolic acidosis, that is the cause for it. Okay, so diarrhea. Now another cause is renal tubular acidosis. So basically here, renal tubular acidosis, what we need to know is it is of three types. So you have like type 1, type 2, and one more is called type 4. So type 1 is basically due to an impaired tubular acid secretion in the distal RTA. So this is called the type 1 RTA. So what happens, why is there acidosis, is that there is a problem in the distal tubular acid secretion. So as we saw the mechanism, right? So when there's a impaired tubular acid secretion, there's acid accumulation back in the bloodstream, which leads to normal anion gap metabolic acidosis. Now type 2 is when you have a problem in the PCT. So you have urinary loss of bicarbonate. So this is the cause of type 2. So why do you have a urinary loss of bicarbonate? That's because the main function of the proximal convoluted tubule is to reabsorb the bicarbonate that is filtered. So if there's an impairment there, the bicarbonate is excreted in the urine without the reabsorption. So this can again lead to acidosis because you don't have any bicarbonate reabsorption. The main reason for a alkaline nature is the bicarbonate ion. Now coming to the type 4. So type 4 basically is a problem in the DCT where you have impaired sodium absorption, sodium reabsorption. Okay, so if there's an impaired sodium reabsorption, it also means that it is basically associated with a decrease in secretion of H plus and potassium. So decrease in secretion of H plus will lead to acidosis, and it's also called as hyperkalemic RTA because you also have a decrease in secretion of potassium, so that will lead to hyperkalemia. So type 4 is called as hyperkalemic type of RTA. Okay, so these are the causes for normal anion gap metabolic acidosis. Now speaking about an increased anion gap metabolic acidosis, the most common cause you can see is ketoacidosis. Okay, and in ketoacidosis the most common cause that you may come across will be diabetic ketoacidosis. So in diabetic ketoacidosis, what happens is that you have an insulin deficiency, which leads to increased lipolysis. So when you have an increased insulin deficiency, you have more glucose in your body, and your body doesn't know where to utilize that glucose, so it ends up utilizing the glucose for the formation of ketone bodies, which leads to ketoacidosis. Okay, so this is associated with hyperglycemia. Now talking about starvation ketosis, so this is basically in patients who are deprived of nutrition. So, or it can be even in people who have a high glucose demand. So it need not be any person who has lack of intake of food. It can also be someone like a pregnant woman or a breastfeeding woman who needs more excess intake of glucose than the normal quantity, but she's taking the normal quantity. So that's also called as starvation. So in this case, there will be accumulation of ketones, but without hyperglycemia, because the person actually has less glucose. So this type of ketosis can also be seen in alcoholics, and it is called as alcoholic ketoacidosis. And another type will be lactic acidosis. So in lactic acidosis, so let me just write it down here. So lactic acidosis, it has two mechanisms. So one thing is due to increased production of lactate. Okay, so the increased production of lactate can be due to hypoxia in the general body, in your systemic body. So it can be due to tissue hypoxia, and there will be a peripheral generation of lactate, like patients with circulatory failure and shock. So in another type of lactic acidosis, there will be impaired metabolism of lactic acid. Okay, so this can occur due to anything like drugs or toxins or even metformin, which inhibits the lactate metabolism in the liver. So these are the two types of lactic acidosis. And when you have a lactic acidosis, of course there's increased acid production in the body, the lactic acid, which can lead to metabolic acidosis and features. So let's move on to the clinical features. So what are the clinical features a person presents with when he has a metabolic acidosis? So in a normal anion gap metabolic acidosis patient, if he presents with diarrhea, if a patient presents with diarrhea, it means that the metabolic acidosis is due to the diarrhea, right? Or if the cause is renal tubular acidosis, metabolic acidosis can lead us to the underlying diagnosis a little early. So if you have suspected metabolic acidosis in a patient, then it can also tell us that RTA is the cause, and the diagnosis of RTA can be early. So metabolic acidosis is a feature that's a presentation in RTA which can tell us that the person has RTA a little early so that we can treat the person. So RTA can be inherited or acquired. Alright, so and in talking about a high anion gap metabolic acidosis, patients present with features of underlying cause such as uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, kidney failure or shock. So uncontrolled diabetes mellitus, it can lead to diabetic ketoacidosis, and kidney failure, it can be due to like drugs or shock. And patients may also give a history of starvation, alcoholism, etc. So when they give a history of starvation and alcoholism, you know that it's starvation ketosis or alcoholic ketoacidosis. So what are the investigations to be done when a patient presents with you with complaints of the metabolic acidosis? So first you can check the level of creatinine. You can check the level of creatinine and electrolytes and the bicarbonate. So this can tell you whether the patient has a kidney failure or not. So if the patient has a kidney failure, you'll have accumulation of creatinine and the electrolytes, and also accumulation of all organic acids. So checking the level of those can help you come to a diagnosis whether it is because of kidney failure or not. Next, RTA should be suspected if there is a normal anion gap and no gastrointestinal disturbance, but there is hyperchloremic acidosis. Okay, so now there is a normal anion gap, but you don't have any complaints of gastrointestinal disturbances. So the other cause can be a renal tubular acidosis. And one more clue which can tell you that it is RTA will be a hyperchloremic acidosis, because RTA, so when it is due to so when your H plus ions cannot be secreted, that is an impairment in the secretion of H plus ion, also your chloride doesn't get excreted. So that you can see in this particular slide, wherein H plus and chloride are linked. Okay, so hence we say that if there is a hyperchloremic acidosis, you can confirm that it is RTA. And also you see the urine pH. So if the urine pH is more than 5.5, so when your H plus is not getting secreted, obviously your urine is going to be alkaline. So if the pH is more than 5.5, you can be sure that your diagnosis is RTA. Now if there's incomplete RTA, so in the case of incomplete RTA, the plasma bicarbonate levels are normal. So incomplete RTA is a case where the plasma bicarbonate levels are normal. Now in this case, what we do is that we do the acid challenge test. So here we give an acidic component like ammonium chloride to the patient. So when you give an acidic component, you are reducing the effective plasma bicarbonate, right? So when the effective plasma bicarbonate reduces, it means that you're making the body more acidic. So there should be reabsorption of bicarbonate ion from the urine to maintain the pH, right? So if there is no such thing, so if there's an impairment in reabsorption of bicarbonate or the secretion of acid when the effective bicarbonate is reduced, that is to maintain pH, if these mechanisms are not taking place, then you say that it is an RTA. So how do you know that these mechanisms are not taking place? So if your urine pH fails to fall below 5.3, so how much ever acidic component you give into infuse into the body, the urine pH does not fall below 5.3, it still remains alkaline. So then distal incomplete RTA will be your diagnosis. So next, coming to the differences between these three RTAs, proximal RTA, distal RTA and hyperkalemic RTA. So first difference will be the potassium concentration. So there's hyperkalemia as the name suggests, and in these two there is profound hypokalemia. Okay, now one important difference is that in proximal RTA, so the proximal convoluted tubule is unable to reabsorb the bicarbonate ion, right? So the urine is technically supposed to remain alkaline, but in proximal RTA, there's still possibility of the urine to be acidified because the distal mechanisms are still intact. So when the urine passes to the distal convoluted tubule, the distal tubule is completely all right. So there is active H plus secretion going on. So this can acidify the urine. Okay, but in distal RTA, what happens is that it cannot acidify the urine because there is a primary problem with the distal convoluted tubule. So there will be no active H plus secretion, and where that active H plus secretion is the major part of acidifying the urine. And also in hyperkalemic RTA, there's a problem with the distal convoluted tubule, so that also cannot acidify the urine. Okay, so due to that, proximal RTA has lesser complications, whereas your distal RTA will have a high plasma acidosis due to less capability of acidifying the urine, or due to this second point, there is high plasma acidosis when compared to proximal RTA. And this high plasma acidosis, when there's increased acidosis in your body, it can lead to calcium mobilization from the bones. So this can lead to osteoporosis, and because there's a high calcium, it can lead to hypercalciuria. So this calcium that's accumulating in your body can be excreted in urine, leading to hypercalciuria, and this calcium can also lead to renal stones and nephrocalcinosis. So these are the complications that you get when you have a distal RTA. Okay, moving to the next slide. So in a high anion gap metabolic acidosis, till now we have seen the investigations in the normal anion gap metabolic acidosis. When you have a high anion gap metabolic acidosis, what investigations do you do? So when you suspect a renal failure, when you suspect that the metabolic acidosis is due to the renal failure, you check for a decreased GFR. So if you have a decreased GFR, then you can be sure that it's due to the renal failure. Or you can check the blood ketones. So blood ketones, you can tell that it is ketoacidosis, and if there is raised blood sugar, you can tell that the ketoacidosis is a diabetic ketoacidosis, and if there is decreased blood sugar, you can say that it's due to starvation or alcoholism. And again, difference between starvation and alcoholism can be done by the history. Now, what is the treatment of metabolic acidosis? The first and foremost thing what we need to do is we need to remove the underlying cause. So that is, if your cause is diabetes mellitus, or any toxins that are injuring the kidney, or any drugs that are injuring the kidney. So if you have diabetes mellitus or a kidney failure, treat that. Okay, now one more thing is, you have sodium and water loss along with metabolic acidosis. Alright, so in this case you need to give IV fluids. IV fluid infusion will also be one of your primary treatment. Now for alcoholism and starvation, we need to give glucose. So because they are deprived of glucose, when you give glucose, it stimulates the endogenous insulin production. So when you have okay, so for these people, the insulin production capability is normal. So you give glucose, that there will be an endogenous insulin production, and this insulin production, it prevents the hepatic ketone production. So there will be less ketoacidosis, and that is going to prevent your metabolic acidosis. Now intravenous bicarbonate should not be given. So this is not one of the primary thing that you should do. Of course, we all think. So intravenous bicarbonate should not be given. It's not one of the first choice, because such a rapid correction can actually lead to hypokalemia. Okay, that's because in the renal mechanism, so when you see the renal physiology, you will get to know that when you have excess of bicarbonate accumulated, there will be a potassium loss. So that leads to hypokalemia. So it is not a first resort, but it is definitely recommended when the underlying disorder cannot be corrected or there is a severe acidosis. So only then intravenous bicarbonate should be used, otherwise it's not one of the first choice. Now for RTA type 1 and type 2, you will give sodium and potassium bicarbonate. So how this helps is that it achieves the target bicarbonate and also brings the so this hypokalemia, right? In type 1 and type 2 you have hypokalemia, so giving potassium bicarbonate brings it to the normokalemia, and also it gets to the target bicarbonate level, and it treats the acidosis. But for RTA type 4, what you need to do is that you can't give these because it already has a hyperkalemia. So you can give your loop diuretics and thiazide, which lead to loss of potassium, right? So this can treat the acidosis as well as the hyperkalemia component of it. Now this is the basic treatment of metabolic acidosis. Thank you.